Imagine a scene straight out of a sci-fi blockbuster. The lights in the press room dim, the reporters go dead quiet, and a sitting U.S. president steps up to the microphone, looks directly into the camera and tells the world, "We are not alone."
Right.
It sounds like, complete fantasy. But high-level intelligence and government officials are signaling that we are inching incredibly, almost uncomfortably close to that exact reality.
We really are. It is a massive paradigm shift. I mean, the conversation is finally moving out of the realm of fringe internet forums and into the actual halls of classified, closed-door intelligence briefings.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're here today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today's mission is to unpack this extraordinary dossier we've compiled for you. We're looking at recent insights from a documentary filmmaker who actually gained unprecedented access to high-level officials.
Yes, alongside a quantum physicist with deep, deep ties to the CIA, the NSA, and the broader intelligence community.
Exactly. And the goal today is to distill their explosive claims. We're talking about an 80-year cover-up, the mind-bending physics of recovered crafts,
Yeah.
and a bizarre but very real government detour into psychic espionage.
It's wild. But here's the lens you really have to view this through, right? This isn't just about little green men or, Hollywood tropes.
Right.
It is about the intersection of highly advanced technology, geopolitical Cold Wars, and the absolute limits of our current understanding of physics. It's basically a masterclass in how bureaucracy functions in the shadows.
Let's start right there, actually, with those shadows. Because to understand the recent release of declassified documents, we first have to understand why this information was buried behind an 80-year bureaucratic wall in the first place.
Which is a long time to keep a secret.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The people involved detail this deeply hidden operation referred to as the Legacy Program. And this operation has allegedly been run by elements of the CIA, the Air Force, the Department of Energy, and major defense contractors since the 1940s. And the craziest part, it operates completely outside of normal congressional or even presidential oversight.
Yeah, and that lack of oversight is, it's entirely by design. Because to career bureaucrats deep inside these defense and intelligence agencies, a sitting president is essentially just temporary help.
Wow, temporary help.
Right. I mean, presidents come and go every 4 to 8 years, but the legacy program remains. Their justification for this immense secrecy originally stemmed from the post-World War II era. They had crashes, like the famous one in Roswell in 1947. They had recovered materials, but they didn't have any actual answers.
They didn't know what it was.
Exactly. You couldn't just step up to a microphone in 1947 and tell a world that had just barely survived a devastating global war that there is a new, technologically superior presence hovering in the skies, and, we have absolutely no way to defend against it.
Which makes sense from a national security standpoint, I guess. But they didn't just quietly hide the metal in the subterranean vaults either. They actively engineered our culture.
Oh, absolutely.
In the late 40s and 50s, the CIA deliberately manufactured a cultural stigma around unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs.
Yeah.
They held meetings to strategize how to make the topic look utterly wacky.
Yeah.
They funded disinformation campaigns, they encouraged the media ridicule, and they pushed the narrative that anyone who saw something in the sky was probably, unstable.
It was arguably the most effective disinformation campaign in U.S. history. But the why of it goes far beyond just avoiding public panic. The U.S. quickly realized they were in a high-stakes Cold War race with adversaries like Russia and China.
Right.
And those adversaries had also recovered non-human technology. So if U.S. scientists published peer-reviewed papers on recovered metals or exotic propulsion in public scientific journals, Soviet scientists could just read them.
They just hand over the research.
Exactly. So by making the topic career suicide, the CIA forced the world's best scientific minds to look the other way. This ensured that all breakthroughs stayed entirely inside classified, locked-down black projects. It prevented adversaries from piggybacking on American research. The motto was basically, you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies.
But that secrecy eventually began creating a massive strategic disadvantage, didn't it? I mean, if your best physicists from MIT don't believe it's real, they can't help you figure out how it works.
Right. You're isolating yourself from the best minds.
Exactly. And the dossier points out that this realization led to a push from within the intelligence community itself, heavily involving figures like Marco Rubio during the Trump administration, to start declassifying evidence.
Yeah.
And that pressure resulted in a historic directive to release the first major tranche of UAP evidence to the public.
It is a slow drip, a very carefully managed disclosure, but the dam has officially cracked.
Okay, but this is where the ultimate skeptic's question comes into play. And you really have to think about this.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world with 8 billion smartphones.
Sure.
If these things are everywhere, why hasn't a civilian captured a crystal clear 4K video of a crash or craft hovering in their backyard? I mean, it feels like a ruthless corporate monopoly, aggressively burying competing patents, but surely someone would have leaked a clear iPhone photo by now.
I know, I know. It sounds incredibly convenient that they only seem to show up where the cameras are classified. But it requires us to stop thinking like humans.
How so?
Well, advanced intelligence doesn't care about our backyards or our cities. If you look at the military data, their activity is heavily concentrated around highly consequential strategic locations. They aren't sightseeing in the suburbs.
Which brings us directly to the nuclear connection.
Yes.
And this is where this goes from curious to terrifying. Because since UAPs aren't hovering over suburban neighborhoods, the military tracks them where they actually do go. And UAPs show a massive, almost obsessive interest in our nuclear footprint.
Oh, yeah.
The dossier details instances in the U.S. where a UAP flew directly over a nuclear missile site and actively turned off the intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Completely took them offline, just shut them down. And it wasn't an isolated incident either.
Right.
There was a profoundly chilling event in the Soviet Union at a base called Belokhorovich. A UAP hovered over the nearby ballistic missile base for hours, and without a single human touching a button or entering a launch code, the control panel suddenly lit up.
Wait, really?
Yes. The UAP initiated the launch sequence for the Russian nuclear missiles.
Oh my God.
For 15 agonizing seconds, the base lost total control of its nuclear arsenal as an active countdown began, before it just inexplicably stopped.
15 seconds. I mean, imagine the sheer world-ending panic in that control room.
Absolutely terrifying.
And the U.S. intelligence community knew about this. They realized that a high concentration of nuclear assets acted like a literal magnet for these crafts. So much so that the U.S. military successfully used our own nuclear sites to bait UAPs into appearing, so our ships and aircraft could study them.
And what they captured on their increasingly sophisticated military sensors during all this is mind-boggling. I mean, the declassified files from that recent tranche include a still image from the 1972 Apollo mission.
Wow, going back that far.
Yeah, it shows a massive, seemingly triangle-shaped craft just hovering over the moon, observing the astronauts. But obviously the most famous example of the data they've collected is the 2004 Tic Tac incident.
Right, with Navy Commander Dave Fravor, an absolute legend of a fighter pilot. He encounters this smooth, white craft shaped exactly like a Tic Tac candy. And the radar data from the ships and jets confirm the craft went from hovering just above the ocean to 80,000 feet, which is basically the edge of space, instantly.
Instantly.
Yeah.
The military observers noted that these crafts are what they call transmediate.
Transmediate.
Yeah, they move through the vacuum of space, rip through our atmosphere, and then plunge directly into the ocean, traveling hundreds of miles an hour underwater without even making a splash.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this. That's like watching a nuclear submarine suddenly fly out of the water to join the Blue Angels in an air show and then just shoot off to the moon.
Pretty much.
It breaks the brain. Physically, how does a solid object move from 0 to 80,000 feet instantly without the G-forces turning its occupants into absolute soup? Or, without bursting into a fireball from the atmospheric friction?
That is exactly the core misconception we have as a public. Asking how the craft survives the friction is the wrong question entirely.
Why?
Because according to the physicists who have studied the sensor data, the craft isn't flying through the air at all.
So they aren't just like building a better, faster jet engine?
Not even close. To answer your challenge about G-forces and friction, we really have to shift from military encounters to quantum physics. Using Einstein's equations of general relativity, the physicists involved in these classified programs actually understand the math behind these impossible maneuvers. It revolves around modifying what they call the space-time metric.
Okay, what does that actually mean in a mechanical sense?
So the craft generates an immense, almost unfathomable amount of energy. It uses that energy to bend space-time, creating a localized bubble around itself.
A warp bubble.
Exactly. Inside that bubble, the craft is essentially in its own isolated pocket of reality. It is completely separated from the environment around it. So whether the environment outside is the vacuum of space, heavy atmospheric air, or dense ocean water, it has absolutely zero impact on the craft inside the bubble.
Wow.
There is no friction because the physical hull of the craft isn't touching the air. There are no G-forces because the craft isn't accelerating through space. Space is moving around the craft.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. It's like a surfer on a massive wave. The surfboard itself isn't violently pushing the ocean water out of the way, right? The
Mhm.
wave is carrying the board. And if that wave hits a floating piece of debris, the wave just pushes the debris aside. The surfer doesn't feel the impact.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The craft is surfing a wave of warped spacetime. And this warp bubble actually solves one of the biggest mysteries that critics always point out, which is the blurry photos.
Oh, right. Because people always ask, if we have such incredible targeting pods on our multi-million-dollar jets, why do the UFOs look like fuzzy smudges?
Exactly. And it's because taking a picture or a video of a UAP enveloped in one of these bubbles is like trying to take a crystal clear, high-definition photo of a koi fish swimming in a pond while the surface of the water is violently rippling.
Right.
You are trying to capture an image through a literal space-time barrier. The light and the radar waves physically bend and distort around the bubble.
That makes so much sense. So we actually understand the physics? We know how they are doing it mathematically?
We do. What is incredibly frustrating, as the quantum physicist in the dossier points out, is the reality of human progress. We have the theoretical physics to write the equations on a chalkboard. Bending space-time doesn't violate our understanding of relativity at all. But we utterly lack the material science and the engineering capabilities to actually build the machine that can generate that much energy. We have the blueprint, but we don't have the tools to forge the parts.
So you have these physicists realizing these crafts don't just defy gravity, they manipulate reality at a quantum level.
Yeah.
But when they looked inside the recovered crafts, they hit a massive wall. There were no steering wheels, no wires, no control panels.
Nothing.
To fly a quantum machine, you need a quantum pilot, which led the CIA down their most bizarre rabbit hole yet.
Oh, yeah. This is where the narrative shifts from the hardware to the mind. In the 1970s, the CIA realized that the Soviet Union was pouring millions of dollars into studying ESP extrasensory perception.
Right, psychic spies.
Exactly. Not wanting to fall behind in any Cold War arena, the CIA approached quantum physicists at the Stanford Research Institute. They gave them some funding and basically said, look into this, prove it's nonsense so we can stop worrying about it.
But they didn't prove it was nonsense.
Yeah.
They accidentally proved it was real.
Yeah.
They started a highly classified, top-secret, special access program that eventually became known as Stargate. And they were testing something called remote viewing, which is essentially training the human mind to perceive detailed information about a distant location, entirely without the use of physical senses. And the results they got are staggering.
The dossier details a specific event where a Soviet plane went down somewhere in Africa. The CIA desperately wanted the technology on board, but they couldn't find the crash site with their satellites. It was lost in hundreds of thousands of square miles of dense terrain.
Needle in a haystack.
Exactly. So they brought in two of their trained remote viewers. They handed them a map of Africa and said, find it. The viewers meditated on it and placed an X on the map. The CIA sent a team to that exact location and found the downed plane within 3 miles of that X.
And just to confirm how real this was, there is an actual audio recording of former President Jimmy Carter corroborating that exact story, openly talking about how a medium gave the CIA the latitude and longitude to find the lost plane.
It's wild to hear a president talk about it.
But it wasn't just finding lost objects. To prove the skeptics wrong, because the scientists kept getting asked, if you're so psychic, why aren't you rich?
Right, the classic question.
They set up a Wall Street test.
Yeah, they used remote viewing to predict silver futures. They had the viewers predict if the value of silver would go up or down on a daily basis over 30 days. And it worked flawlessly. They generated $260,000 in profit just to prove the data was statistically sound.
That is insane. But the most profound experiment, the one that really bridges the gap to the UFO phenomena, happened at Stanford. They brought in a remote viewer to try and affect a highly sensitive quantum chip.
Yes.
And let's really look at what this means. This chip was buried inside intense magnetic and superconducting shielding. It was designed by the Navy to be completely impenetrable to any outside interference, electrical, magnetic, or otherwise.
It was isolated from everything in the physical universe to ensure the quantum state of the chip was completely stable.
And the remote viewer, using only their mind, successfully affected the chip. They stopped its regular oscillation and then made it oscillate twice as fast. A human mind physically altered a shielded quantum environment.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
So, if humans can be trained to mentally find lost planes, predict the stock market, and alter computer chips, why isn't this happening everywhere? Did the government really just shut down the ultimate cheat code to reality because the program supposedly lost funding in the 90s?
Well, it is highly unlikely they just stopped. When a program like Stargate becomes public, the government rarely stops using the tool. They just reclassify it and move it further underground into a new black project.
Right.
But when we connect this psychic espionage back to the core topic, the UAPs, a terrifying and profound theory emerges from the intelligence community.
The empty seats.
Yes, according to the people who have actually seen the inside of these recovered non-human crafts, many of them have absolutely no flight instruments whatsoever, just seats.
Just empty seats.
Which strongly suggests that these crafts might not be piloted by physical manipulation. They might be piloted via a direct quantum-entangled consciousness connection.
Okay, so how does a quantum entangled consciousness connection actually work? Are we talking about something like Bluetooth for the brain?
It's far more profound than Bluetooth. In quantum physics, entanglement means that two particles can become linked so that whatever happens to one particle instantly happens to the other, even if they are light years apart.
Okay.
The theory here is that the electrical and quantum signals in the pilot's physical brain are entangled with the quantum material of the craft itself. So the pilot thinks about moving, and the craft responds instantly because, at a quantum level, the pilot's mind and the ship are the exact same system.
Wow.
The physics that allowed a human to alter that shielded quantum chip at Stanford might be the exact same science that allows an intelligence to pilot a transmedium craft through a space-time bubble.
The physics of the mind and the physics of the crafts are the exact same thing. I mean, we have covered an incredible amount of ground today. From an 80-year bureaucratic wall of secrecy designed to hide a Cold War technology race, to transmedium crafts that warp spacetime to observe our nuclear missiles, all the way to government-funded psychic spies proving that consciousness can alter physical reality.
It's a lot to take in.
The universe, and our own government's understanding of it, is vastly more complex than anything written in our high school textbooks.
The implications of this impending disclosure are monumental. We are facing what intelligence officials call an ontological shock, a complete shattering of our understanding of our place in the universe.
And why does any of this matter to your everyday life? Because if the dam fully breaks and these technologies are shared, it changes everything.
Everything.
It could mean the immediate end of the global energy crisis through new zero-point power sources. Zero-point energy essentially means extracting limitless power directly from the vacuum of space itself, rather than burning fossil fuels.
Yeah.
It could be the dawn of anti-gravity travel. And, as former President Ronald Reagan once suggested in a famous speech at the UN, it might be the one thing that forces humanity to realize we are a single family facing a massive populated universe. It could completely unify us.
It forces a massive reevaluation of what it actually means to be human.
It really does. And I want to leave you with a final, slightly unsettling puzzle from the dossier to mull over on your own. During the discussions of the crashes and the recovered bodies, the experts noted a running theory within the intelligence community. They suspected some of the biological entities recovered from these crafts might actually be manufactured.
Meaning they aren't the original evolved species that built the technology?
Exactly. They are just biological drones. Avatars engineered in a lab simply to survive the harsh trip and pilot the craft, completely disposable. So if the beings visiting us, the ones causing this 80-year panic, are just the disposable Mars rovers of an alien race, what does the actual intelligence sitting back on their home world look like? And more importantly, are we truly ready to meet them?